Anyway, Sean Davis, co-founder of The Federalist, Gregg Jarrett with us, Fox News legal analyst, author of the New York Times bestseller Witch Hunt. I honestly find this to be the biggest, most colossal waste of time. And I watch the media breathlessly acting like it's something when I see nothing, Greg. There's nothing here. Read the transcript. None of this testimony matters in the least.
Yeah, Vindman testified he was concerned about the president's conversation with Zelensky. That's nothing more than opinion, an impression, or a feeling. We all have them. They are a poor substitute for facts. The unvarnished truth is that Vindman just didn't like what Trump said on the phone call because the president did not strictly follow Vindman's notes that he'd prepared for the discussion. And in fact, in describing the call, Vindman said, well, this was not in the preparation material I had offered, as if to say, how dare Trump deviate from my planned script? So Vindman then complains. Instead of going to his direct supervisor, he conveys his feelings to an individual in the intel community that he won't identify, who's likely the source for the faux whistleblower, who then filed a complaint that doesn't qualify under the whistleblower statute as a valid complaint. So Vindman, it appears, was instrumental in initiating the impeachment insanity.
It really is, Sean Davis. There is an insanity here. Because if you want to quid and you want to pro and you want to quo, you got to look at Joe. Fire the prosecutor, you get $1 billion. If not, you're not getting the $1 billion. Call Obama. You're not going to get it. I'm leaving in 6 hours. There's your quid pro quo.
Right. And it was, I'll take issue just very briefly with one thing you said earlier. You said this hearing was a dud for impeachment. And I think, I would disagree with that. I think it was a bombshell, but one that blew up in the hands of Democrats. They had planned today to be a display of a uniformed military officer lowering the hammer, lowering the boom on Trump. And instead what we learned was that Alex Vindman was actually patient zero and the anti-Trump bureaucracy's coup epidemic throughout the government. This was a guy who was clearly starting the entire whistleblower effort against Trump. He said that before he went to his superior, before he even went to the NSC lawyer, that he spread around his so-called concerns about this call to more than half a dozen officials who he called his coordination partners, and also an individual who worked in the intelligence community whom he refused to name. Now, remember, this guy, he said he didn't know who the whistleblower was, and yet when he was asked that question, who'd you talk to in the intel community, his lawyer said, well, he can't answer that because it might identify the whistleblower. This entire sham blew up in the Democrats' face today, and it did so because their number one plotter here, Vindman, was revealed to have been instrumental in starting this entire thing, and his testimony showed him to be completely untrustworthy.
Here's the other thing, and you tweeted this out today, Sean, and I hadn't thought about this, but it's profound, is that Vindman admitted to going behind the president's back before the president spoke with Zelensky, giving Zelensky instructions on what policies he should pursue and what his posture should be towards the U.S., and having already admitted in previous testimony that he was told that he told Ukraine to ignore Trump. There's your bombshell.
He had really contradictory testimony, both today and compared to his previous deposition, where he claimed, I never went outside the chain of command. The president's always in charge, and yet we have him admitting, I went around his back. I told the Ukrainians not to get involved in this or that. I told them that, they need to do this policy, not this other policy that the president wanted. This is unconscionable behavior. This is the kind of thing that if you did in the military and combat and you went around a commander's back, you would have serious legal implications for you. And yet you have this guy just out there openly admitting, I went behind his back, I did this stuff. And it was clear in questions today when he was asked, does the Secretary of State work for you? Do these ambassadors work for you? Does the president work for you? This man bristled whenever he was reminded of his actual place in the hierarchy in our government. And the reality is he's a mid-level bureaucrat. He's not a principal. He's not a decision maker. And he was clearly riled being reminded of that it's the president, not a mid-level bureaucrat, who makes American policy when it comes to foreign nations.
By the way, what guy would ever think, Gregg Jarrett, that he has the ability to go behind the president's back the way he did? And you're right, he was obviously insulted that his prepared talking points weren't used by the president. I don't think President Trump is a talking point kind of guy. And this was not the conversation for anything deep anyway. It was more of a congratulatory call. And by the way, don't surround yourself with the corrupt people that your predecessors surrounded themselves with. I'm worried about that. And then said, hey, your country was involved in our election interference with the Ukrainian court had determined and Politico wrote about in January of 2017. So I think that the president was faithfully executing the laws, but apparently Mr. Vindman thought his policies and advice to Zelensky was more important than anything else. It sounds like he was trying to set up a meeting like a Ukraine first policy.
Right. Vindman thought that he's above the Secretary of State, above the president. He's some super special expert to which all, including Trump, should defer. And the interesting moment occurred when the witness was reminded about how he touted or more likely exaggerated his unparalleled credentials and authorities during his deposition, and I'll quote him, "I'm the director for Ukraine. I'm responsible for Ukraine. I'm the most knowledgeable. I'm the authority for Ukraine for the National Security Council and the White House." My word. I mean, the self-puffery was unbecoming, but it really spoke volumes about what motivated Vindman when, the president had the audacity to conduct foreign policy in a way that this mid-level bureaucrat NSC staffer did not pre-approve. How important was Vindman in the White House? Well, he never so much as met the president. So that explains his testimony.
It's all hearsay. None of it would be admissible. Anyway, stay. All right, wrapping things up. All right, summary, Sean, I'll ask you first, Davis from the Federalist, 30 seconds. How does this now end?
I think this ends with a vote in the House that is completely partisan with all Democrats and no Republicans voting to impeach. I think that gets to the Senate, and it goes nowhere in the Senate. They may have a trial, but there's no way on earth Trump's getting convicted. The whole thing is a show meant to damage him ahead of the 2020 election.
Gregg Jarrett, how does it end?
Same way Sean said it would. This is a carnival, and frankly, I wrote a column that said Trump should hope that Schiff's carnival never stops because it only extends to his benefit. It ensures his continued residence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The backlash against Democrats here will be severe.
All right, when we come back, thank you both, Davis.